very much. If you have any question, I will entreat you to please note that the right time will come for you to ask the speakers and we will provide answers to them. The last person to speak for today will be Mannaseh Azuri, who is a freelance journalist. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mannaseh.
Distinguished fellow speakers, colleague journalists, ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, I would want to use this opportunity to call on the government of Zimbabwe to release Hopewell Chilono from jail. This is one of the most outstanding journalists on the continent of Africa. I remember when I was in journalism school, back in 2008, he won the CNN African Journalist of the Year with a very compelling documentary titled Pain in My Heart. Some of us became who we are or what we are in journalism because we learned from such distinguished figures, and unfortunately, he's been in jail, accused of incitement, and even lawyers to defend him are being stopped. I think this primitive behavior of African leaders and countries must cease. On the local front, Ghana for many years has ranked very favorably on various global press freedom indices, and the most notable ones, as we have seen, has been the World Press Freedom Index, being ranked or compiled by Reporters Without Borders. We are considered one of the freest countries in Africa and across the world for the practice of journalism. And whenever I attended journalism conferences around the world, I spoke so highly about Ghana's situation, and I found people coming up to me and wishing they had the Ghanaian media environment in their respective countries. Regrettably, the story has changed. If I attended any such conferences today, I wouldn't be able to speak with pride about press freedom in Ghana. And I'll proceed to give reasons why I think the current administration, that the Akufo-Addo administration, is rolling back the progress we have made over the years. But before that, I want to be mindful of the topic for this forum, which is the state of press freedom, freedom of expression, and media freedom in Ghana. This means the scope goes beyond media freedom. I belong to a number of WhatsApp platforms, and there's one of such groups which has over 200 members, made up of mostly intellectuals, what we call your typical Ghanaian middle class, well-educated citizens who are doing so well in their respective professions. It is one group that I often find time to engage, but I learned something very odd about this group. I realized that whenever anybody posted something about Donald Trump or American politics, this WhatsApp group would come alive. People would comment, argue, and make all kinds of debates. But anytime a post is made about the situation in Ghana, a very important national issue, corruption, governance, everybody will mute. So about 3 months ago, I decided to ask why the issues or discussions about other countries often generated so much responses, but when it had to do with our own country, nobody seemed to care. And the response I got was that it was safer to speak or discuss politics in America. Because when you do that, you don't risk being attacked, insulted, and tagged as belonging to one political party or the other. And that, for me, defines the state of media freedom in Ghana and freedom of expression generally. There are many people today who have something to say, but they are afraid to speak up. To be fair, this did not start in the Akufo-Addo administration, but the degree of fear has heightened in the last 3.5 years. There is now viciousness against people who speak up, activists, journalists, and people in the civil society. I've always maintained that what differentiated Ghana from dictatorships was our freedom of expression. It is no wonder that in G, they often refer to democracy as Kabi, Mami Kabi. Never mind the fact that the NDC and NPP see democracy as DB, Mami Dibi. Our constitution has given sweeping powers to the president, and apart from queuing to elect our leaders every 4 years, there is nothing much that distinguishes our democracy from the likes of Rwanda, which some people say is not democratic enough. Perhaps some autocratic regimes are better in providing jobs, hope, and social amenities for their people than we do in our democracy. The freedom of speech, which is the strongest leg of our democracy, has however been limited to a select few. You have journalists, you have politicians, and to some extent, serial killers. This has been the norm over the years. The police, the army, and security agencies cannot speak freely and criticize the government. Even if they are facing challenges in their departments and you go to speak to them, they are afraid to mention them because they will be deemed to be speaking against the government. Then you go to the civil service. You find other civil servants and even public servants must sing praises of the government or face victimization if they hold strong views against certain policies or issues in the country. Those who praise the government and are attacked as such become the prey when the opposition wins power. The poor masses, as we know, those in the streets, those in the slums, those in the rural communities and all, are often the voiceless. But those who are supposed to speak for them are now being hounded. There is freedom of expression only when the content of the speech is in favor of the government. Currently, if you follow the Jubilee House page on social media, you will find headmasters and heads of second cycle institutions whose videos are being recorded and used to promote the free SHS. I tell you, those headmasters dare not speak against the ills of the implementation of that program. And that, for me, is the state of media freedom in Ghana. In the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, I've had some doctors and nurses and health professionals reaching out to me and saying, look, what we're experiencing in our hospitals is a far cry from what the President, the Information Minister, the Health Minister, and other government agencies want the public to believe. So I ask, why can't you go public? Why can't you speak on record? And they will tell you there is so much victimization and they are afraid to speak. If you're a producer of shows or documentaries, you are very likely to have your request for interviews turned down by the right experts. And the reason they often give is that if I speak, I will be victimized. So most of the time, you find producers falling back on the same politicians, and listeners do not understand why certain topics should have politicians as panelists instead of the experts. They are afraid to speak, and like Sule rightly mentioned, when they attack you, they find so many other ways of attacking you, even advertisement, and some businesses are taken from people just because they are outspoken. Generally, the NDC and the NPP, in my view, are not terrorist organizations. So if you're attacked as NDC or NPP, that shouldn't be the problem. But what often comes with the tagging is what scares a number of people, especially those in the private sector whom we think have nothing to lose. The harassments come in various forms. And there are people who are even too afraid to even speak about the fact that they fear for their lives. In the words of Albert Kandaba, who is our National Security Minister, a democracy without checks and balances is worse than a dictatorship. And I agree. But can we say we have the needed checks and balances in our democracy? When you follow the commentary that comes out, anytime major decisions are taken or judgments are given by our Supreme Court, then you have the feeling that many are yet to be convinced that the judiciary is truly independent and can hold the president and his team in check when it matters most. And our parliament has over the years also proven too willing to please the executive. Independent institutions such as the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, SHRAJ, the Audit Service, among others, have for various reasons been undermined and are unable to hold the executive in check. We all know what happened to Daniel Yadomelevo, the Auditor General, who has become the source of pride for all reasonable human beings. But for some reasons, those who hold power think he should go. So the media, which is often referred to as the Fourth Republic, in my view, plays a vital role in holding the political class in check. Journalists are supposed to be voices for those whose mouths have been shut by the political class. But it appears journalists are now scared for their own lives. And speaking up now is an act of extreme bravery. Some are even too scared to express their fear. So sometimes they will speak to you privately and then begin to say some of the problems they face. I have been doing journalism for 10 years now, but in the past 2 or 3 years, anybody who cares about me would call, and after or even meeting me anywhere, the discussion often ends with, Mannaseh, you have to be careful. These people are dangerous. Mannaseh, you have to be careful. These people are vicious. Mannaseh, you have to be careful. These people are vindictive. And hearing that over and over again is even not good for your emotional strength and your psychological welfare. So I think the media is not very free. I started writing commentary on national issues in 2006 when John Adekun was president. I've lived through the Atamil's administration and was very critical in the John Mahama administration. When I published the fourth story in 2016, I remember that night the communications minister, Dr. Edward Omanebuama, called me in the night and said, look, we know the magnitude of this story, and so if you ever feel threatened or unsafe, let us bring some police officers to your house. At the time, I told Dr. Omanebuama that I was okay, so I rejected the offer because the environment, in my view, was not as dangerous as it is today. And we are currently in another dispensation, and I cannot say safe in terms of safety for the Akufo-Addo administration. And in this discussion, I think we should be honest enough to call out people, because when there are good things that are happening within this era, you have VW coming to establish a factory here, the president will take credit. You have some factories that have been, business that have been working, they have factories, now they establish just branches and then they are counted as one district, one factory, and the president is taking credit for every single good thing that happens in this country. So if there are negative repercussions in the media front or press freedom, we should also be able to call out whoever is in charge, especially when there are pointers to the fact that they may be contributing or they are contributing to what we have in this environment. A lot has happened in the past 4 years, but let me just cite 2 examples of why I think the media landscape is becoming dangerous and free speech is becoming almost like a crime. The first thing is that we have seen a lot of violence from January 2017 till now. People wielding guns, you find just a political party tag and all of those things. If you are in such an environment, it naturally puts fear in you. So whether you're a journalist or not, you begin to be afraid. You get afraid for your own life and your own safety. That is one. But in the past, when we talked about the attacks on journalists, there were isolated cases of individuals acting without any form of backing from state institutions. So you find, for instance, in 2015 or 16, that about Standobe destroying a recorder of a GBC journalist and a whole lot of issues. The Media Foundation, led by Mr. Suleiman Ibrahim, led us to petition the presidency, and nothing came out of it. But it appears to now be getting out of hand. We had the arrest and detention of some journalists from the modernghana.com by national security operatives. Their offices were raided, their phones and computers were seized. And as I speak to you, they tell me their phones and computers are still with the national security. They haven't been returned. They were blindfolded and driven to the national security offices, and one of them actually said they were tortured. This is not something we should be experiencing in Ghana. If you hear such pieces of information from North Korea, you may feel it is a norm because that's what happens there. But we shouldn't be getting there now. And apart from the fact that news portal published negative articles about some ministers and MPs of the governing party, there is no evidence of wrongdoing that warranted the treatment meted out of these journalists. But nobody has been held accountable as we speak. And in my view, the scariest moment for journalists in this country, or in the Fourth Republic, was the murder of Ahmed Swale of Tiger Eye PI after the publication of the number 12 documentary. The murder itself was very unfortunate and regrettable, but the incidents leading up to that incident, that murder, are even more worrying. The leading member of the governing party, who is also a member of parliament, actually put a photograph of this undercover agent on television and said, well, you don't know him, that's his photograph. He lives in Medina, I'm told. If you meet him anywhere, attack him and I'm going to pay. Where was Ahmed Swale killed? He was shot and killed in Medina. And as we speak, nothing has happened and nobody has been held accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, in which civilized society will this be tolerated? And why would journalists not be in fear when their colleague is killed in the wake of an investigation and nobody seems to care? There is also enormous pressure on media houses, and the weak ones have to transfer that pressure to the journalist. What is happening does not portend well for our democracy, and it does not portend well for the peace and prosperity of our country. Chapter 7 of Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, is titled The Ethnic Theory of Plane Crashes. In that detailed and intriguing chapter, Malcolm Gladwell digs into some of the major causes of plane crashes and how the culture of the pilot or the co-pilot can be a reason a plane crash or be safe under certain circumstances. A critical analysis of cockpit conversations recorded by the black box after plane crashes led the writer to conclude that many accidents happen due to how the two pilots communicate with each other or with the control center in their moments of distress. He writes, and I quote, "In commercial airlines, captains and first officers split the flying duties equally. But historically, crashes are far more likely to happen when the captain is in the flying seat. At first, it seems to make no sense, since the captain is almost always the pilot with the most experience. But think about the Air Florida crash. If the first officer had been the captain, would he have entered 3 times? No. He would have commanded, and the plane wouldn't have crashed. It's just like the chief driver of a company and a newly recruited driver driving from Accra to Mannaseh. If the one behind the steering wheel is the chief driver and is making mistakes that could result in a crash, the young driver would probably be too afraid to speak up or give hints instead of being blunt. And what Malcolm Gladwell is saying in that chapter is like, instead of saying, please be careful, we are likely to crash, or do this, the one who is a genius is likely to say, well, if you had done it this way, wouldn't it have been better? And by the time that is processed to mean how serious the situation is, there would be a crash. He goes on to explain in the book that when pilots are in distress and call control centers, they are more likely to get help quickly and be safe if they are assertive and refuse to be bullied. The problem, however, is that in some cultures, such as ours, the pilots are too timid, and this could result in fatal plane crashes. He calls something the power distance index. When the power distance index is low, such as in the United States of America, people are able to challenge authority. In countries or cultures such as ours, where the power distance index is very high, where leaders and those in authorities are treated like demigods and not challenged, it often ends in disaster. In January this year, former President John Ajay Kufuor revealed that the 1972 coup d'etat, which saw the overthrow of the Buzia administration, could have been avoided if those of them in government had been bold enough to speak up. He said, and I quote, "I think the things that contributed or made it easy for the coup makers to succeed was that perhaps we were not critical enough." And the former president was speaking he was the deputy minister in the Buzia administration, but he was speaking to members of the Kufuor Scholarship Foundation, who paid a courtesy call on him early this year. He continued, and I quote, "We were not outspoken. We deferred too much to leadership because 27 December, just 2 days after Christmas, people had even not come back from the Christmas enjoyment and were summoned to the castle to tell us that we're going to devalue the currency of our country." How much devaluation? 44%. And what happened? Within just 2 weeks after. This or that is history now. So, that would be a mistake I own up to. I was one of those who just didn't speak up. The consequence of not speaking up today is as dangerous as they were in 1972, and they are not in anybody's interest. Those of you who have read Hans Christian Andersen's classic story, The Emperor's New Clothes, would agree with me that speaking truth to power, despite the consequences, can even save the emperor's ass. Our leaders should understand, and here I'm talking about the presidents, that they are just ordinary human beings like us, who wield the power and exercise it on our behalf. The power is actually not for them. They are just holding it on behalf of the people and must exercise it in the supreme interest of the people. As we sit in this hall, former President Mahama can come to this hotel, go to the restaurant, eat and leave without causing a stir. Of course, if there are no party fanatics say we want to take selfies with him, he can go without causing any stir. 4 years ago, this place would have been cordoned off by armed soldiers and police and detectives in plain clothes hours to that visit. In 2016, that power was taken from him. Today, you cannot drive in front of that road, just in front of President Akufo-Addo's house. You cannot drive on that road. His private residence in Nima. Even shops and residences between that road and the main street have been forcefully evacuated. In 2016, however, not even the presence of a police station next to his house could stop some NDC supporters from pelting his house with stones. So what has changed? What has changed is not because Akufo-Addo has grown in wisdom or in stature, or has suddenly become an extraordinary human being. What has changed is that on the 7th of December 2016, headquarters and street hawkers, and the homeless and the rich and the poor all queued to give him their mandate, their power to exercise on his behalf. We still remember how he came begging everybody in 2016, and I remember I wrote an article saying the president or the candidate should tell us what he could do instead of going about begging and try me. And on another political platform, I heard him say that, well, people are saying he shouldn't beg, but he knew that the power belonged to the people, so he would continue to beg. So, this tells us that they must not try to shut those of us who own that power. Because whatever they do, whether right or wrong, does not affect they and their families alone. The effects of corruption and bad governance are like rain. Those rains do not fall on any single roof. And we should not leave the destiny of our country in the hands of a few people with vested interest. When those considered among the most intelligent of our MPs are focusing on social media issues on the floor of Parliament, when we have very serious transactions such as the minerals, royalties, and other discussions ongoing, then we know we are on our own and must take up the responsibility of safeguarding our interest. For political parties such as the NPP, it is not in their interest that the culture of silence is finally or has returned to our country under their watch. The NDC suffered from a generation of journalists that went through the repressive regime of the PNDC. Until recently, the NPP used to be the toast of civil society and the media. What we are experiencing is something some of us would never have linked or associated with the NPP, and the leadership of that party needs to be concerned. What is more worrying is the fact that the NDC and the NPP often learn from one another, and I'm talking about a race to the bottom, learning the bad lessons. So if you continue this to happen, when NDC comes, they are likely to also upgrade this to a different level. And when you talk, they are likely to refer you to the Akufo-Addo era, where you're not in this country when journalists were killed. What happened? Why are you holding us to different standards? They will always want to refer to the past, so we shouldn't allow this to happen. And for the president who is now in charge, it is in his interest to ensure that this stops. Anytime the NPP and others want to talk about the president's record in the media or even the rule of law and others, they often refer to the fact that, well, it was under Akufo-Addo that the criminal libel law was repealed. But there's a proverb that says that no matter how tall your father was, you have to do your own growing up. We know that the criminal libel law was repealed built under the presidency of John Ajikun, and like the free SHS and other programs and projects that will be credited to Akufo-Addo now, I don't think any minister would want to boast on that. He should do his own growing up. And at this stage where we have one of our own being the information minister, we have a so-called human rights champion being the president, the least we would expect from them is to ensure that we also have the freedom to speak up without fear or favor. If the NDC and NPP are going to continue their DB Mamin DB, then we should also have the opportunity to have our Kabi Mamin Kabi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mannaseh. I think we'll just zoom into the question and answers. We'll take the first set, 3 questions for any of the speakers. So if you have a question, just show by hand and I'll come to you. Okay, 1, 2. Okay. You have to come here for your questions. Then that will be. Because you are live, I think the person will have to come here for your question. Thanks. I'll see you. So Israel, start with you then, the gentleman.
Thank you. My name is Mannaseh, and I work with the Class Media Group. I don't have a question, I just have a brief comment to make. Now, listening to, and the reason I'm speaking today is because of 2 people, Mannaseh, who is a long-time good friend, and then Suleiman, because he's from the Media Foundation for West Africa. Now, listening to Mannaseh, I cast my mind back to 1995 when President Nana Akufo-Addo then was spokesperson for the Alliance for Change. And they led the demonstration where they put more than 10,000 people on the streets. We know what happened. People died, people were injured. The media supported President Akufo-Addo when he was in position and gave him so much support. What I think we have lost over the period is the fearless and vociferous nature of our media personnel, such as Dr. Okonobe, Kwesi Pratt Jr., Kweku Bako, Akoto Ampa, and our own revered Professor Kari from the Media Foundation for West Africa, the former executive director. What I'm trying to say here is that we have heard speaker after speaker say, enough is enough. Why are we afraid? Why are we afraid? The question we should be asking ourselves as media practitioners is that why are we not as fearless as the people who have come before us? So the problem here is not being afraid. The problem here is refusing to be fearless. Mannaseh has shown over the period that he's able to criticize both the NDC and NPP, and he's paid the price for it. Why can't other people do the same? The lives of Kwesi Pratt, the lives of Kweku Bako Jr. have been media men who have been very vociferous. Some of us, when we were young, we used to look up to them. They have shown the way. Why is the case different now? And for me, I think that as media practitioners, we are co-authors of our own misfortune. When politicians and political activists attack media people, we still give them our platform. We fail and refuse to censure them. If you attend an NPP event and you attack as a media man, your media house should be bold enough to say that we will not cover an NPP event until that matter is resolved. If you attend an NPC event or an NPC politician attacks a media person, the media house where you work should be bold enough to say that we will punish the NEC for attacking one of our very own. As a result of media terrorism, in 1995, we didn't have many media houses as we have now. Yet the media was very fierce in Ghana. Today, we have over 200 media houses and the media is timid. I think that this situation is not acceptable. And as media practitioners, we should not accept the fact that the politician is more powerful. They need us more than we need them. We should be able to stand up to those who are in power, like Mannaseh has said. If you go to the United States of America and you see how media men grill the president, grill the press secretary, you'll be amazed. Over here, if you attend a media event where you're supposed to ask the president a question, you're supposed to act respectful, prim and proper, and keep your hands behind your back and not ask the president difficult questions. I believe that it is time, especially now that we have more media houses than we used to have in 1995, for us to show as media persons that we can be fearless, we can be critical of the regime of the day, we can be critical of the opposition, and we should not be afraid of the price that comes with it. Because those people who have come ahead of us have paid the price for us, and it's our time that we do our bit and ensure that media freedom, as guaranteed by the Constitution, is really, really put into practice in Ghana. Thank you very much.
Previous years, don't forget that all journalists are different. Now, we have to be able to identify them. Journalists are, although they are journalists, they are not freedom fighters. So we do not expect journalists to come out and be absolutely fearless in the face of anything at all. Because if I realize that my colleagues are being killed or being beaten, and the people are going to stop me for doing that, there will be some fear. Okay, it's not everybody who's going to come out and say that, no matter what's going to happen. Love me and care about me. I have so many things that I want to do with my life. I can't say that I know I will be killed, I know I will be beaten, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to prove that I'm fighting the system. No. And I want to put all the blame on journalists. We take duty away from the institutions that are supposed to ensure that there is a safety net, around the practice of journalism. Because there are institutions that are supposed to ensure that we are safe. There are institutions that are supposed to ensure that the right thing is done. So if the journalist is doing his job of telling the truth and informing the people, why should the journalist go on that duty? So someone else needs to be doing that. Where you mentioned some media houses being strong and standing their ground and supporting their colleagues, I 100% agree with that. I also think that one of the challenges to media freedom is, some of our managers in media houses. If your manager is afraid of the politician, who are you? You understand? Sometimes you have an issue, you know that this is something you want to fight for. Somebody somewhere calls your manager, shouts and says a few words, makes some threats. Your manager will call you and tell you to apologize. You understand? And there's a common joke we have in the newsroom. Sometimes you're doing a story, someone's looking at you like, nobody wants to do this story. And you continue reading, they ask you, are you going straight to your mother's TV station? You understand? So that should tell you that you do not have complete control. Okay, you do what you are allowed to do. Because the owner of the station does not have freedom. So you that are working under that person, what freedom do you have? And I remember mentioning ownership of media houses by politicians, businessmen, or sometimes affiliated to governments. This is where it takes us. Because if you have a lot of ownership by people who are very partisan, it's going to affect the final output that's coming out of that media house. There's no way you can tell me that, for example, let's say, for example, General Mosquito owns a media house. Do you think that media house is going to be investigating see everything that the NTC does, bringing out allegations, following up on criminal activities, suspected criminal activities. It's not going to happen. If, for example,